I'm Ric Edelman. Okay, you've been saving and investing all these years. It's time to enjoy yourself on a 95-foot yacht. Does that sound a little rich for your taste? Well, how about opening your own restaurant? We'll get all the details from Master Chef Geoff Tracy. It's all on the menu on this week's edition of The Truth About Money.
Best-selling author and founder of one of the nation's largest financial planning firms, Ric Edelman.
Thinking about a cruise? I sent my colleague, financial advisor Brandon Corso, to Florida to take a look at a different sort of cruise on your own pleasure yacht, complete with a crew of 4. The price might surprise you.
The history of the name, a 1920s film star, silent film star, named Zazu Pitts, is who the boat is. It's the namesake of the vessel. And the theme throughout the boat is 1920s deco. She's built in Holland in 1970. The boat has a 2,000-mile cruising range. She is truly designed to take your family anywhere on the planet you really want to go.
Let's take a look at the interior.
I'll do it. Excellent. With the deco interior that you're witnessing here, you can see like the statue back there is from Erte. And Erte was heavily influenced the deco design era. He was a Russian-born artist that moved to Paris in the early 20s. Louis B. Mayer in 1925 flew him over to Hollywood, and he did the set for Ben-Hur and several of the big Hollywood productions.
What's the length of the boat? What's the size of the boat?
95 feet.
Okay. And the asking price?
$2,495,000. To put yourself in a boat of a similar condition in 2005, you would have been right around $4 million.
This is a nice size for a lot of people because this suits their capabilities with a limited crew.
I guess the owner of a boat like this is not going to captain it himself or herself. How many people is a crew on a 95-foot boat?
Typically, you would have a captain and at least a mate. Sometimes we have 2 stewards on a boat like this.
Do they charter the boat?
This boat charters for $29,500 a week. Just spin the clock back 36 months, this exact boat was roughly a $40,000 a week boat.
Walk me through the other big costs.
If you use 10% of what you paid for the boat, that's a very good generalization.
On a boat like this, you're probably going to be in the range of $250,000 a year. Okay, and that would pay for a crew, for fuel, provisions,
dockage, insurance,
okay,
and maintenance.
This isn't money that's sitting in some investment account that you look at on a computer screen. This is real. This is real life, and people who want to enjoy their lives and reap some rewards for all the hard work they've done all these many years love boats.
Guys, I had a great time. Doug, thank you.
Thanks, Brad.
Jason, I can't afford the boat, but it is fabulous, so thank you very much.
You can afford to charter it, maybe.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Brandon, I couldn't help noticing everybody was barefoot on that boat.
Well, I've been on a boat before, but not one like this, and they stopped me and they said no shoes.
Maintenance is a huge issue with a boat of that size. 95 feet, most of us, when we think about these yachts, it's these mega yachts by the dot-com billionaires and the Saudi sheiks and so on that are hundreds of feet long. This is 95 feet and an old boat. The price, I was surprised, $2.5 million?
Yeah, and the gentleman was telling me how it's fallen from the highs close to 50% in value. So the boating industry has really been affected by the recession as housing has.
So this is not a great investment. This is truly a lifestyle.
This is fun. This is a toy. And I'd never been on any kind of experience like this before. And you can see how it's so appealing.
No question about it. But still, even though $30,000 a week is really cheap from what I would think of as renting a yacht, it's still $30,000 for a week.
Well, and if you buy the boat, he said the purchase price was $2.5 million. That's not all. There's some pretty major expenses that go along with it, so you've got to make sure you factor that in to make sure you can afford to keep the boat after you buy it.
$250,000 of annual upkeep to maintain the boat and to crew the boat, and as you mentioned, fuel and provisions and such. This, we always say to our clients that there are 2 investments you should never buy: anything that eats or can sink. And it looks like this is something to enjoy for a week, and that's it.
Well, it was a lot of fun. We were down in Fort Lauderdale, which is really the boating capital of the United States.
Which adds to the pleasure. Brandon,
For sure.
Thanks a lot.
My pleasure.
I used to be a social worker. here in D.C. Social worker, yeah. I was a social worker here in D.C. back in the 80s. Back then I was making $19,000 a year. And I was working with people on poverty. Yeah. I'm making $19,000 a year, and I'm working with people on poverty. Families were coming to me talking about, Joe, how can we get off poverty? I'm like, well, when I find out, I'll let you know. I'm standing here in the same food stamp line you standing in. I'm gonna need a social worker assigned to me pretty soon.
At a recent conference, investment advisors were asked just one question. What do they think of the bond market?
More risky than stocks.
I find my clients have a lot of misunderstood ideas about risks of the bond market. And right now is a very important time to truly understand the risks in the bond market.
The bond market isn't necessarily one to participate in right now unless you have expertise.
We have seen great returns from bonds over the past 10 years, and that is not going to continue.
Is it better to invest a lump sum all at once or gradually over time? We'll be back with the answer later in the show.
We want to go first up to Scott. He's calling from Annapolis. Hi, Scott. How are you?
Hi, how you doing?
Terrific.
I want to lend my son a down payment on a house, $250,000.
That's the down payment?
The down payment.
How much money are you going to give him?
Yeah, that's why I'm giving him $250,000.
That's a heck of a down payment. What's the price of the house?
$500,000.
$500,000. Okay, that's a very generous down payment. Two errors, two flaws in that concept. First, there's no reason to make anything more than a 20% down payment on a house. Because you don't want to have too much equity in the home, because the more money you give to the lender, the less money you get to keep and invest. It would be far better for you to give your son the 30% too much that you were planning to give to the lender. Let your son invest that 30%. This way he can create wealth over the next 30 years and use that wealth to help him make the mortgage payments. That's the first flaw. Second issue is taxes.
Yeah.
If he gives his son $250,000, what happens, Anderson?
Well, he's exceeding the gift tax limit, the amount that you're allowed to give in any given year to someone else. And that amount is $13,000.
No, wait, hang on 1 second. Scott, are you married?
Yes.
And is your son married?
Yes.
Okay. So now the $13,000 grows.
That can go up to $54,000 if Scott and his wife each give $13,000 to their son and his wife in 1 year.
That becomes 4 gifts instead of 1 gift.
Exactly. It's called gift splitting, and you're allowed to do that in any given year. Once you exceed that amount, then there is a tax that is due on the excess, and you will typically pay that tax using a fairly complicated little formula that reduces what's known as your unified credit amount. And now we're getting into the weeds.
Yeah, so we'll stay out of the weeds and basically say that, Scott, if you give your son $250,000, roughly $200,000 will be considered subject to the gift tax, and the gift tax could be as high as
35%.
Which means that could cost you about $70,000, $75,000 in taxes for the privilege of giving your son $250,000.
Okay.
So sounds
too good.
Yeah, not too good. So for all of these reasons, Scott, what we would recommend that you do instead is give your son 20% of the $500,000. That's $100,000. No more than $100,000. This way, 52 of it will be free of tax. The other 50 subject to the tax. That's a $15,000 tax, not nearly as big a deal, but still a big deal. And that could argue for an even smaller gift to your son, or better yet, give him money now, because you and your wife can give your son and your son's wife $52,000. Do it in December, because you can do it again in January.
It's a calendar year.
It's a calendar year gift limit. Therefore, over the 2 tax years, you can give away the full $100,000, and this way your son gets the 20% down payment, and you don't incur any taxes at all.
Thanks a lot.
You're welcome, Scott.
Is it better to invest a lump sum all at once or gradually over time? The correct answer is it's better to invest a lump sum of money all at once.
Hello, Rick. I've seen a lot of books out and several infomercials where people are pitching the idea of investing in real estate tax liens. Apparently, according to them, you get a guaranteed, by law, 16% return on your money. And if the person who owns the real estate doesn't pay up, then you wind up with the real estate free and clear for pennies on the dollar. Anyway, obviously it's too good to be true, so I'm trying to figure out what the catch is.
I'm glad that you recognize it's too good to be true because, in fact, it is. Although the law says, and it varies by jurisdiction, how much you're going to get, try to collect. That's the first issue. Let's back up a second so everybody knows what we're talking about. A tax lien certificate is real simple. You are a property owner, you own your home, you have to pay property taxes. If you don't pay your property taxes, the government has the right, the local county, to seize your home. And the government now is the owner of this property. It then has to sell the property. Does your local county government have the expertise, the labor to be able to do all that? They don't want to be involved. So instead of foreclosing on the home, instead of kicking the homeowner out, instead of becoming the owner of that property, what the government does is they sell the amount of money they're owed in taxes to an investor. They issue a certificate for those taxes, and they say to the investor, that guy owes us 20 grand. You give us the 20 grand, and now you own it. And if the guy doesn't pay you, you foreclose on him. You kick him out of the house, and now you get to own the house. In fact, we won't even charge you the 20 grand that the guy owes us. Give us 5 grand and we'll be happy. So you buy a $20,000 tax lien for $5,000, you collect on the guy, you just made a fast 15 grand, and if he doesn't pay you, you foreclose on him, you own the house, you sell it for a big fat profit. Sounds pretty cool.
Right.
So where's the downside? Number one, if the government hasn't been able to get the guy to pay, what makes you think you're going to be able to get the guy to pay? That's the first problem. Second, if the guy hasn't paid, what's the most common reason he hasn't paid? He doesn't have any money. I mean, homeowners are honest, ethical, upstanding Americans who have just had something bad happen to them. They got thrown out of work. They had a medical crisis, maybe a marital problem. They want to pay, they just can't. Well, if they can't pay the property taxes, you got to ask yourself a question. What else can't they pay? Chances are they're not paying for the repairs on the house either. What kind of condition is this place in? When you take it over, you're going to foreclose on the guy and kick him out? That's a foreclosure process. That takes months. And when the guy knows that he's eventually going to get kicked out of the house, do you think he's going to continue taking care of the place? Maybe by the time the guy leaves, you walk in and find the place trashed. You might find holes in the wall, cigarette burns in the carpet, the refrigerator, washer, dryer missing, the roof leaking, termites all over the place. Who knows what kind of condition you're going to find yourself in? And if this has been in a neighborhood where there have been a lot of other foreclosures, now you've got an entire neighborhood of bad shape. You're really going to sell this property quickly for a lot of money? As a result, here's our opinion about tax lien certificates. It's not an investment, it's a business. You need to investigate the specific certificate that you're thinking about buying. What property is it associated with? Who's the owner of that property? What's going on there? And what are the realistic expectations of being able to make a profit on that enterprise? This is something that takes active involvement. It's not like putting money into a mutual fund, sitting back and waiting for your monthly statement. You're going to be actively involved in the real estate business, the mortgage business, and maybe even the foreclosure and handyman and rebuilding business. And if you are in such a business, sure, it can be a lucrative business just like any other business can be. But to think that you're going to read a book and start doing this, chances are you're going to get a big education.
That's what I thought. Thank you.
It's weird. It's interesting. My parents are funny, so it's good for the act. You know, living with them now, but it's been a little difficult because they're not 100% supportive of what I do for a living. You know, because they sent me to college. What snobs? Too soon? Okay. They sent me to college. They had bigger dreams for me, apparently, than, living in their spare bedroom. They're selfish people is what I'm saying. They're selfish. They never say, Erin, we hate that you're a comedian, but they do very passive-aggressive things that let me know how they feel. Like 2 Christmases ago, they bought me a GPS. That's a great gift for someone who travels like I do, right? But then along with the GPS, they gave me a card that said, we hope you find some direction, which I thought was shady. I'm like...
Rick, can you answer this question for me? I have a mortgage and a second mortgage, and I wanted to combine the two and get a new mortgage. However, because of the economy, my house is not worth 80% of a loan. So what's my best option?
It is so frustrating. Interest rates are low. You figure you can save a lot of money by refinancing, only to discover that the bank won't give you the loan. So what do you do about it? Well, there are a couple of options. Number one, you can do what's called a cash-in refi, the exact opposite of what people were doing a decade ago. Remember when you got a bigger loan and you cashed out when you refinanced? Well, now you do the opposite. When you refinance, you give the bank more cash so that your loan-to-value ratio does become 80-20. By making 20% equity, the bank will, in fact, give you the refinance that you're looking for. The obvious downside of that strategy is that you might have to come up with $10,000 or $20,000 or $30,000 to make that work. A, you might not have the money, and B, it might not be a great use of money. Takes us to plan 2. Sell the house. If you can't maintain the current mortgage payment, if you don't like the current interest rate you're paying and you can't refinance it, sell the house, take the cash, and go buy another house where you can start over, this time getting the mortgage and the interest rate that you really do want. Does any of these ideas make sense? You'll know best when you talk to a financial advisor.
The most common reason for financial failure is not earning enough money, procrastination, paying too much in taxes, or failing to allow for inflation. We'll have the answer straight ahead on The Truth About Money.
Owning a restaurant is high on a lot of wish lists. Few, though, have actually tried, and most of them have failed. So come meet Chef Geoff Tracy. He opened his first restaurant when he was only 27, and he now runs 6 very successful restaurants in the Washington, D.C. area. We spoke with him at his newest eatery, Chef Geoff's, in Northern Virginia. Jeff, thanks so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
So you have an eclectic background. You got a theology degree from Georgetown University.
Yep.
Did it not occur to you when you went into college as a freshman that there wasn't going to be a direct career opportunity as a result?
It didn't even occur to me when I was a senior in my spring semester. My housemates, saying, "Oh, I got a job. I got a job with Lehman Brothers." I'm like, "Who are the Lehman Brothers? I've never even heard of these guys."
Thought it was a clothing line.
I did not know that it was Wall Street. So.
And so, how did you make that transition from theology studies to culinary?
I was excited about restaurants. I did my first job as a busboy just before I went to Georgetown University. And I had worked in an accounting firm and a law firm in the previous 2 summers, and I hated those jobs. Sitting at a desk, there was no windows, it was just awful. And then I'm working in a restaurant, there's energy, excitement, there's a chef who's like yelling, and it was just an awesome experience.
At age 27, you started your first restaurant.
Yeah, and I had graduated from the Culinary Institute of America. I sort of studied a skill. I did not have any money, really, but I sort of jumped off the entrepreneurial cliff.
That's how most entrepreneurs do it, but in the restaurant industry in particular, most of them fail. How did you avoid failure?
My father was a CPA. We actually did, we did the books. It was a failed locations, and it was vacated, so the rent's a little lower. All the, HVAC, all the plumbing, all that stuff's in place, and then, we were able to put paint on the wall and really sort of sell it from a service standpoint and a food standpoint. And we actually made $61 in our first month.
But you were cash flow positive.
Cash flow positive. By the end of the day, if you're making 5% in a restaurant, you're considered extraordinarily successful.
And then operating the restaurant you started at age 27 wasn't enough. You now have 6 restaurants.
Right. I continue to look for, basically failed restaurants, and I still do that today. The one we're in right here in Tysons in Northern Virginia, this was a failed location.
Running a restaurant is kind of crazy. I mean, it's, as you've described, everything's going on all at once. You've also got 3 little kids at home, twins and another, all under the age of 5. How do you keep all this stuff, how do you keep all the balls in the air?
Well, when I first started, I was working 80, 100 hours a week. I mean, it was just all-encompassing. And when you're a new entrepreneur, it's going to take up all your time. 10 years ago, I was a micromanager. I wanted to do everything. And then I started to realize, hey, a lot of these other people around me are very talented. And so I started hiring better and better people. I started giving people more and more responsibility. And it turns out, heck, they were even better than I ever was. I get to walk around. I get to see what people are doing. I get to talk to my guests. I get to talk to my cooks and chefs. I get to hang out in the kitchen. I can still do quality control just from sort of observation and walking around.
We always try to give our viewers some actionable takeaway from our interviews. So first, if somebody wanted to open a restaurant, what's the key couple of pieces of advice you'd have?
I would say first, make sure that you know what you're doing. You wouldn't, become a doctor, just because, oh, I'm going to open up a doctor's office.
And if you wanted to be an investor in a restaurant, what advice would you have?
Run. I've told a lot of people who have said, hey, I really want to invest in this restaurant because I want them to recognize me when I go there and get a special table and stuff like that. I was like, listen, I'll save you $100,000 right here. Give $100 to the maitre d' or the host once a year. They'll remember you. They'll give you your special table, $100.
And finally, for someone who wants to have a great dining experience, what steps can you take to help ensure that?
Try to enjoy restaurants at times when not everybody's trying to enjoy restaurants. So everybody's there on Friday, Saturday night at 7 o'clock. So, try a Thursday. If you go to a restaurant that's really packed at lunch, get an 11:45 reservation, and that way you have the chef's attention, you have the cook's attention right there at 11:45.
Chef Geoff, thanks so much.
Pleasure being here.
The most common reason for financial failure is
because they get into too much debt. They take on too much debt.
They give up too easy. They don't ask the hard questions of themselves.
They don't plan ahead of themselves.
The most common reason people fail financially is that they procrastinate. They put off dealing with their financial future.
Before we go, we heard a lot on today's show about living the dream, buying a yacht, being able to help your kids with a down payment, even starting your own restaurant. The one thing all this has in common is determination. To live the dream, you have to be willing to put in the work. You need the discipline to save and invest so that your dreams can become reality. And that's the truth about money. I'm Ric Edelman. See you next week.